Hey everyone, it's Dr. Troy Schott here with Modern Martial Arts and Health Radio, presented by Ground Dragon Martial Arts. And today I've got a special guest on. I'll just go ahead and get into the introduction. It's Scott M. Rodell. He studied martial arts since the age of 9 and has dedicated the last 4 decades exclusively to the study of Yang Family Taijiquan. Rodell has spent many years traveling to find and study with the best teachers in the lineage to fulfill a personal goal, renovating Yang Family Taijiquan. He sought out teachers known for certain specialties, pulling together elements of the system that have become separated and fragmented. Rodell has been privileged to receive instruction in push hands and free fighting from William C.C. Chen, sword and push hands from so there was a Master T.T. Liang and the Yang Family Michuan Taijiquan form applications push hands, fan, sword, and spear from Master Wang Yen-nien. And he is the director of the Great River Taoist Center, which was founded in 1984 and is now headquartered in Washington, D.C., and is a branch and affiliated school across the U.S., Europe, and Australia. He began teaching internationally in Russia at the request of the Soviet Wushu Federation in 1991. In 1992, the Moscow branch officially opened as a branch of Great River. For 14 years, Rodell has taught across Western Russia before turning over the Russian branch of Great River Taoist Center to his disciple student Albert Efimov. There's a lot more here to discuss, but let's actually just get into talking with you. Opening up definitely with that, teaching in the Soviet Union back in 1991, kind of right around the time it, turned into the Russian Federation. How did you end up doing that?
Well, first, I'd like to say thanks for having me, and I really
Yeah,
appreciate your support.
yeah, not a problem. Glad to have you.
Yeah, it's good to be here.
Yeah,
It was an interesting situation. The Soviet Union was really falling apart when
yeah,
I first went there. I mean, there was rubble on the street and things
mm,
like that. I remember visiting one of my students. He was at the time a university student, and we went to his dorm,
yeah,
and the elevator was broken. And I said to him, and he lived up on the fifth floor or something, so it was a good walk up. And
yeah,
I said, "When are they going to fix that?" And he goes, "I don't know. It's been broken as long as I've been here."
yeah.
He's
Wow.
sort of, I think he
Yeah.
was in his fourth year at the university.
Wow.
There was broken glass around the outside of his dorm where a window had broken and nobody had cleaned it up. So it
Wow.
was really unfortunate. But it was really a great experience because the Soviet people are really tough people.
Yeah.
I mean, just physically and
Yeah.
mentally tough people.
Yeah.
And we often practiced outside, and it was
Yeah.
winter.
Yeah.
So it was,
Yeah.
we would go out in the morning from 9 in the morning till
Yeah.
noon. We'd go to the park. There's a park called the Silver Park.
Yeah.
We'd go there, and we'd basically be standing in, 6 inches of snow training,
Right.
and it was one day it was raining, and so you just get back on. There was no cars, you back on a bus to a subway back to somebody's apartment, hang up your clothes to dry, put on dry clothes, have lunch,
Right.
go back, train for 3 hours, and then at night underneath a street light, because that's what we had.
Yeah.
It didn't matter if it was raining, and telling students that they should do Zhangzhuan 3 times a week for half an hour
Yeah.
instead of getting like, oh, that's a lot. You got, could we do that more?
Yeah.
And so, it was a really, really fine time there. It was really good. It was, demanding in a lot of ways for
Yeah.
everybody,
Yeah.
but it was a really very, very good experience, and I was very happy to do it.
Yeah.
Um, and it opened up a whole new world for Taijiquan, especially for our lineage. My lineage, this Yang Michuan Taijiquan, Taijiquan lineage,
Yeah.
to bring it to a new area and where there were such enthusiastic students and students who are really martially oriented,
Right.
really sticking to the old way, which I really also enjoyed.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Russia's the only place where I've ever been where after class, when everybody's, in the changing room, putting on their street clothes, the student came up to me and says, "So teacher, if a man tried to kill me tonight with knife on subway, can I use this to kill him? And the answer, of course, was, well, you've got to train, but yeah, we'll have to work on that palm strike a lot.
Yeah,
But
absolutely.
that was it was a different world. It was very dangerous. I mean, it
Yeah,
wasn't that there were good neighborhoods and bad neighborhoods. There were neighborhoods that were seriously dangerous, and every
yeah,
place else was also dangerous.
right,
And the police were dangerous.
right,
We never spoke English on the subway if there were police around,
yeah,
because I would have been arrested.
right,
And it would have been arrested. Well, why? Well, they'll find a reason.
yeah,
you know,
yeah,
because if they arrest an American, then they can squeeze some money out of you.
yeah,
So we had to be careful all the time.
yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Um, so tell me a little bit about your history. I know we kind of went over a brief introduction, but how did you end up in Taiwan to train?
Well, I was really lucky. Like a lot of people, probably like yourself, I just always practiced martial arts pretty much my whole life.
Yeah.
And when I was in college, I had been a wrestler, wrestled all through high school,
Hmm.
and I'd done pretty well at that, but I pretty much reached my limit.
Right.
And I'd done a little bit of fencing, here and there.
Okay.
Nothing really serious, just a bit at the university. But I realized that I had been doing martial arts my whole life. I felt like something was missing when I couldn't wrestle anymore. When
Yeah.
I was as a wrestler in high school, I could win three-quarters of my matches. So
Right.
that's pretty good.
Yeah.
I won the majority of my bouts. But when you go on to college, you're getting people who would have coming from high school would have been winning only losing 5 or 10% of their bouts.
Yeah.
So saying, well, I won most of my bouts, three-quarters of my bouts I won. When you go to college, it's like, well, you're nothing.
Yeah.
In high school, that's good, but in college, that wasn't gonna cut it.
Right.
And after a while, I realized, like, okay, I kind of reached my limit there, and I
Yeah.
wasn't doing anything martially, and I just sort of realized, maybe for the first time, that this is sort of the way I'd been living for as long as I could remember. And I felt something, something that needed to be filled there. And I was thinking of Shaolin Chen, not that I
Yeah.
really knew one Chinese martial art from another, to be honest.
Right.
And a friend said, why don't you try this Taijiquan stuff?
Yeah.
And I wasn't so sure about it, but I thought, what the heck, I'll go and give it a try. And after a couple of false starts with teachers who were so-so,
Yeah.
I started studying with Robert Smith,
Okay.
and then I was with him. I think it was my third year or so that I was with him,
Yeah.
that Wang Yen-nien came
Okay.
and to visit him. And he had known Wang Laoshi from Taiwan.
Yeah.
He had studied with him also in Taiwan
Yeah.
before he had studied with Chen Manjing.
Yeah.
And Robert Smith was not the kind of guy who thought much of anybody.
Right.
He tended to, and then understandably, there are a lot of, as we know, there are a lot of posers in the martial arts, and he would speak
Yeah.
up about those.
Right.
And so it was really shocking when he said, this man, Wang Yen-nien, is coming, and he's the real thing.
Yeah.
That was, like skyrockets being shot up and signal
Yeah.
flares,
Right.
because he almost never had anything good to say about anybody
Right.
in the martial arts world. So I thought, all right, I've got to really meet this guy.
Yeah.
And he came over to me during push hands class, and he said, because I was interested in Taoist practice as well, but there was no place to really go and learn that,
Right.
and study it. And so, there was John Blofeld's books were about the only thing that was around that actually had any substance to them. So he came up to me and just sort of quietly said, he's the real thing. He's a Taoist priest. And he walked away.
Hmm.
And so that was a big statement coming from somebody like Robert Smith.
Right.
So I volunteered to be his driver because he needed people to chauffeur him around.
Yeah.
And so I got to spend some personal time with him and get to know him, and just
Yeah.
realized, like, okay, this is the guy. This
Yeah.
is the man I really want to study with. And I was able to push hands with him a little bit. To be honest, of course, my push hands, I was still very much a beginner. But what I really saw with Wang Laoshi, felt pushing with him, was that everything I'd read in the Taijiquan classics, which up until then had been, like ideals,
Yeah.
he completely physically manifest.
Right.
I mean, there was nothing. I could have pushed him. It's, as hard or as fast or any way I wanted to, and he just wasn't there, and he had my line, and I
Yeah.
was stuck, you know.
Yeah.
And I can say years later, after I had maybe accomplished something, even after I did well in international competition, push hands competition, I was able to push with Wang Laoshi alone. Just he and I were in my school,
Yeah.
and he said to me, and this is after he'd been in a car accident. He was in his 80s. He would have been in his mid 80s, I believe, at
Okay.
that time. If I
Yeah.
remember right. He had
Yeah.
been in a car accident, so he walked with a cane
Yeah.
because he had been a bad accident. And he said to me, "Let me see how soft you are." And he stood with me with my back to the wall.
Yeah.
And I can say now, okay, so this is when I was a pretty young guy, and he was more than twice my age.
Yeah.
And I had taken second place in world competition, and I can say, maybe with a little pride, that he only knocked me down once.
Right.
So, and I could not get him. And I tell you honestly, nobody's going to, in the public, do anything that's going to make their teacher lose face, right? We all care about our teachers. I really love Wang Laoshi, but this was my chance. Let me see what I could do.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get him. I couldn't even get close to him. And then if I really, really tried to get him, nah, he neutralized me and got me. And I was doing my absolute best. And he put me to the wall repeatedly. But like I said, he only knocked me down once.
Well, that's good.
He was at a special level of skill. And I know everybody loves their teachers and respects them and tends to think very highly of them.
Yeah.
But I can qualify it with Wang Laoshi and say, I was winning competitions, and he was about 2.5 times my age.
Right.
And I couldn't even get close to pushing him.
Yeah.
So.
Wow. Yeah, he. I think I read a little bit about him, both obviously in your books as well as in Robert Smith's books, because Robert talked about him quite a bit.
Yes.
Had a huge section on him. I think probably almost as big as the section on Chen Mangqing, and he seemed like a very interesting teacher. And where does his Yang style come from? What was the history background?
But he has actually a quite interesting background. Unfortunately, Wang Laoshi had the sort of that curse of having lived in interesting times.
Right.
He was born during the late Qing dynasty, and he, at that time, China, of course, was a lot of changes going on, and there was the warlord period.
Right.
And he was actually in the Shanxi provincial government. He was in the first graduating class of the police academy.
Yeah.
And then he went straight into the military. In those times, being a fascist, really, his teacher, his boss, Yan Xishan, the generalissimo, the warlord of Shanxi province, was what we would call a fascist today. But in those times, things were changing, and that was thought of as the modern approach to things.
Right.
His state was, had good social welfare and a modern army and things like that. So it was very modern compared to Qing China.
Yeah.
And he was an officer in his army and rose up fairly high.
Yeah.
He became one of his 6 influentials, was one of his sort of council of 6 officers. And so that's why it was very important that he get out and got to Taiwan. Otherwise, he might not have survived the revolution.
Right.
But in that capacity, he had studied martial arts, I think, most of his life. Shaolin Quan, Bagua, and Xingyi Quan, and also the Yang Ban Ho style of Taijiquan.
Okay.
And when he was at the military base in Taiyuan, the capital of Shanxi province, he was hand-to-hand combat instructor.
Yeah.
And he'd also learned 3 systems of bayonet fighting. So he'd lived through the war with the Japanese, so he'd seen plenty of fighting. But there was this man living there in Taiyuan, Zhang Qingling. And Zhang Qingling was well known because in 1929 he had won the fighting championship in Nanjing.
Right.
So, and also, but Zhang Qingling was also a Taoist and kind of kind of a quiet guy, was not really interested in teaching a lot, having a lot of students. And so, but Wang Laoshi was also in the same Taoist school, this Jianfa, Gold Mountain School.
Okay.
And his father, Wang Laoshi's father, was also in that lineage, and they were all studying. Zhang Qingling, Wang Laoshi, and Wang Laoshi's father were all studying and practicing at the same Daoguan under another teacher, also surnamed Zhang.
Okay.
And that's how Wang Laoshi was able to sort of get this introduction to study with Zhang Qingling, who otherwise didn't really want to take any students, didn't want to be bothered with students, I guess.
Right.
And but he was able to do that. And Wang Laoshi told a funny story once. He said, so he went, got this introduction and went to Zhang Qingling and said, so, here, I want to study. And Zhang Qingling said, well, what have you done before? What's your background? And so Master Wang goes, kind of counts out on his fingers and goes, well, I studied Shaolin Chen and Xingyi and Bagua and this and this. And Zhang says to him, oh, well, you've learned a lot. You don't need to learn anything from me. So bye.
Yeah.
And Wang Laoshi realized, he caught me.
Yeah.
So he sort of pushed him a little bit, Zhang a little bit, and said, I got this special introduction to meet you and so on. So I'd really like to stay with you. And Zhang agreed, but only if Wang Laoshi would stop all of his other practice.
Right.
He had to only practice this Taiji Chuan. And Wang Laoshi said he agreed. He said secretly he kept practicing the other stuff for a little while, but then he realized that was a mistake, and he really stopped it. And he had to get somebody else to teach his combat fighting class and stuff like that.
Right.
So that's how he was able to get this art that was formerly secret, or kept kept only within the Yang style, only within the Yang family.
Okay.
Zhang Qingling had learned from Yang Jianho.
Okay.
So at first he learned from Yang Chenfu, and then later from Yang Jianho.
Okay.
And that's how he got that teaching that had been previously kept only within the family.
Right. Well, it's interesting because usually it goes the other way around. People started with Yang Jianho and then they ended up with Yang Chenfu. So it's
these things are kind of unusual. I think it's quite unusual for Zhang to even have been exposed to the art.
Right.
But first of all, people probably wonder, who is this guy Zhang Qingling? If you look at the Yang family manuals that were published in the Qing period and in the early Republic, unlike the English translations of them, they have lists of their disciple students.
Right.
Because this is something everybody has a problem with. I had this problem in Russia with people I never met getting a videotape and claiming to be my students and starting to teach the system, having learned it from a videotape. So if I can have that kind of problem, you can imagine the Yang family.
Right. Yeah.
So
absolutely.
they publish lists. These are our disciple students. These are the people we say are approved, so to speak.
Yeah.
And Zhang Qingling's name is listed there.
Yeah.
There's also photos of Zhang Qingling with Yang Chenfu.
Right.
So he's not like, every lineage has a nice story about the Taoists in the mountain who, taught their teacher something secretly. This is a person that we know of that existed. We have his photo.
Yeah.
We have his photo with Yang Chenfu. We have him listed as a disciple of the family and so on. So, we're pretty sure about him. Nobody can absolutely prove any of this kind of stuff because it's mostly by word of mouth. Yeah. But there is primary source material to prove that, okay, this guy is a real person who really studied with the Yang family.
Right.
But in short, what he did is he fought a challenge bout when Wan Lai's son came to challenge Yang Chenfu. And Wan Lai's son was at that time going around making his name by picking off big masters.
Right.
And so Zhang had an exchange with him, won that exchange. It was a very short exchange. And so Yang Jianho saw that. He stood up for the family when everybody else was probably going, uh-oh. Because, as you know, right, if somebody walks into my school to challenge me, some unknown, has to fight with my students first. You have to earn the right to get to the big guy, right?
Right.
So and when everybody else was scared to death, nobody else would want to fight Wan Lai's son. He was really he's a well-known fighter himself from the Zhiran system, right? Yeah. So Zhang stepped up.
Yeah.
And so that kind of, won the attention of Yang Jianho. And Zhang Qingling was an orphan and he went to live with the Yang family because he was interested in martial arts, and he was
Right.
sort of adopted as a gardener, as kind of a
Yeah.
houseboy.
Right.
And then slowly as he grew up, he was able to stay with Yang Fu, and so on. So this was a guy that they'd known since he was a child.
Yeah.
And as Wang Lao said once, he was good material. This means that he was built basically like a gorilla. This guy,
Right.
he had like size 14 feet.
Right.
Wang Lao said that with his shoe on, he could put his foot inside of Zhang Xingling's shoe. He had this enormous foot, these enormous hands that like
Yeah.
guys in the NBA have with like ridiculously. I mean, he had
Right.
a fist the size of like a cantaloupe.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
this is not a guy, and long, lanky
Yeah.
arms. And so he was really,
Yeah.
like I said, good material to make a martial artist out of,
Yeah.
a really good build.
Yeah.
So I think all those things combined together, but especially standing up for the family's honor, young Genho decided to pass this art on to him.
Right. Well, that's I don't know if you heard why Bagua Zhang actually specializes in kind of the palm strikes, and apparently when they unearthed Deng Haichuan's body to move it, they measured everything and they measured his palm, and he had freakishly big hands.
Right.
And apparently, I guess he just liked to slap people, and that's why Bakwa
I lost you there for just. Sorry, I lost you there just for a split second.
Oh, I was saying that that he had freakishly long palm. Dung Hai Chen had freakishly long palms, so instead of punching people, he preferred to just slap people, and that's why Bagua tended to specialize a little bit more in palm strikes and less in closed hand hitting. I don't know how true that is, but at least it kind of gives probably a more probable answer to
Right.
why.
It gets the point across.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So, what was training under Wang Laoshe like? How did how did how did he break down the training? Obviously, the solo barehand form, and then you guys went into weapons and stuff like that. So he kind of had a seems like he kind of had an interesting approach to training. And how much did you spend with push hands and Sancho?
Well, it was. I would say he was very thorough as a teacher. I
Okay.
think this one thing that's really missing today.
Yeah.
I often see people are not martial artists; they're martial artsy. You
Right.
know,
Yeah.
they like to wear the uniform and do some flashy forms and be
Yeah.
maybe very athletic, but that's all they do.
Yeah.
Wang Lasher really, really was teaching the entire system. Um, and push hands, in Taiwan, I would go over to Taiwan for short periods, for basically a month at a time, and just train really intensively.
Yeah.
Morning class was form practice out at Yanshan, Round Mountain, and which is right in front of the Grand Hotel.
Okay.
And then there was evening classes, of course. And evening classes were more like the classes we tend to have here in the States, where Tuesday and Thursday were form, and there was lots of people, so you broke up. You weren't always necessarily with Wang Lao-shi, but you were maybe one of the senior students. So depending on who was doing what form when,
Yeah.
and when and where. And then Monday, Wednesday, Friday was push hands.
Okay.
So the emphasis was more on push hands, and I often point this out to people, especially today, even amongst my classmates. There tends to be more class time. In fact, I think if you surveyed globally Taiji schools, you'd find out that probably 90+% of the time on average is spent on forms,
Yeah.
and maybe they do a little single hand push hands at the end.
Yeah.
I mean, I've heard that so many times.
Yeah.
In Wang Laosher's school, it was 3 hours of push hands,
Yeah.
Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Yeah.
So you had 9 hours of push hands,
Yeah.
and form would have been roughly about 2.5 hours. So you
Right.
figure 5 hours compared to 9 hours. So basically, close to 2/3 of your time was spent in really, really rough push hands.
Right.
I mean, I often have bruises after push hands practice.
Yeah.
Which is something like today, and people, if you give somebody a good push, and really, give them a good fudging today, people will think like, oh my goodness, you have the wrong attitude,
Yeah.
It's like, well, how are you going to learn to yield if I don't give you something that's worth yielding to?
Right. Absolutely.
So it was pretty rough,
Yeah.
and sometimes, not always, but sometimes Chinese like to show the guy who's not Chinese that it's their art, and they'll come after you.
Yeah.
But if you can hold your own, then they like you, and it's all cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
uh, but so it was really emphasis on more on that work, and we would come in for push hands class. There's a series of exercises. 13 push hands exercises in the dalu. People didn't tend to usually do the dalu because that's time consuming. But those exercises alone generally took about an hour.
Wow.
So that's just kind of that basic training.
Yeah.
1 hour of just one person's pushing, usually 20 to 30 times.
Yeah.
A specific push and a specific yielding,
Yeah.
and they're paired. And then you'd go through those. So you would push my left side, then my right side, then we'd switch, and I'd push your left side and right side, then we switch to the next exercise. And going through that whole set of exercises took a solid hour.
Yeah.
So, that's what the kind of thing that's missing today. People think they're practicing Taijiquan, but, I've said this even at seminars where, teaching in Netherlands, many of the seminars are there, since it was sponsored by their Taijiquan Association. A third of the people there would be teachers. And I would say to them, like, you say you're practicing Taijiquan, but you're not.
Yeah.
You're practicing bits and pieces of the system.
Yeah.
That's it.
Yeah.
You don't even, you're doing no strength training, no power training, no endurance training, no things that were standardly part of the art.
Right.
Take the bang arms training, for example.
Yeah.
I mean, I've had my own classmates tell me that we don't do that in our system.
Yeah.
But I learned that from one of my senior classmates. Showed me that because I knew something's not right. Sancho, your hands clash, and it's like, okay, that hurts.
Yeah.
This is not right. I'm not. Something's missing. So I talked to one of my senior classmates, George Hu. He's down in Texas, and he showed me how to do it.
Yeah.
And so we added that to our regular Sancho practice. Every Saturday in Sancho, we would condition our arms and legs and back and so on.
Yeah.
And some years later, two of my students had gone over to Taiwan to also train with Wang Laosher. This was many years ago when he was still with us.
Right.
And after morning practice, they were doing the bang arms.
Mm-hmm.
And Wang Laosher came over to them and didn't say, hey, what are you doing? We don't do that. He came over to them and said, you're not doing it properly. Let me show you how.
Yeah. Nice.
So
Nice.
I think this goes to answer another part of your question is, of course, in Taijiquan, we're supposed to stick and follow.
Right.
There's no idea of attack and defense. You move with what's coming to you, right?
Yes, of course.
And I think Wang Laosher was very much like that as a teacher.
Yeah.
Students who were easygoing and lackadaisical,
yeah,
he was easygoing with.
Yeah.
Students who trained hard,
yeah,
he was really hard on them.
Right.
And so honestly, I think many people who study with Wang Laosher have a very, very different view of him than I do.
Right.
And, you can discuss who has the right view. They're in the majority. There's more people who took it easy.
Yeah.
So you can always sort of say, well, they must be right because there's more of them saying that.
Yeah.
But I would turn around, and I don't mean to say this to be boastful or to put myself above any of my classmates or anybody.
Yeah.
But, Wang Laosher chose to teach me the sword, and he didn't really teach anybody else the sword the way he taught me the sword.
Right.
So here I am. I'm not Chinese. I'm a Jersey boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he took me aside and said, when I had him come to my school to teach, specifically to teach sword work, he said to me, I've never taught this before, and I've never wanted to teach this before.
Yeah.
And he told me that, and I, of course, that was also his way of saying, kid, you better not screw this up.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very Chinese way of saying, I expect something back here,
Right.
Differently than we'd say it in Jersey. But so that was different. I mean, but it was all up to the student, I think. And I think that's Wang Laosher was very much a modern man in many ways, a product of his time.
Yeah.
When he came to the United States and visited Washington, he went to the National Archives and saw the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. Wow. And he really admired that. He thought this was a really good thing. That he said China needs this kind of thing.
Right.
So he was very modern in that way. Yeah. But on the other hand, it was also in some ways very, very classical.
Yeah.
And if a student worked really hard, then he'd teach you.
Yeah.
If you didn't, he would smile and say, "How's everything? How you doing today?"
Yeah. Yeah.
And he never really he expected you to supply the discipline.
Right.
And I think many people really miss that.
Yeah. I think that's very common even now. I know I've experienced that with a couple teachers that if I show up and I put the effort and energy in, I got more out of it than
Absolutely.
some of the other people who would just kind of show up and that would be the only time they really ever practiced. And I remember when actually my first Tai Chi teacher, I started with him, and he would show me a few of the moves and everything like that. And then a few months down the line, he walked up to me one day and he's like, I didn't expect you to be as devoted and diligent with this as you ended up being. And I ended up spending a lot of private time with him because of that, and I never had to pay him for it. So
Of course. No, I mean that's often the case. I think
yeah,
everybody who's teaching is teaching because they want to.
yeah,
And I can't make a student be the way I want them to be. I just
right,
have to wait. Like every other teacher, I have to just be patient, and the students sort themselves out. I don't have to set tests for them; they test themselves.
yeah, yeah,
That's
absolutely,
true. I mean, and I think there's a funny thing today that people will say things like, "Well, when the teacher, when the time's right, the teacher appears,"
yeah,
or when the teacher thinks I'm ready, he'll come and tell me to do it.
yeah,
That's nonsense.
yeah,
The teacher, I had to get on the plane and go to Taiwan. He wasn't going to
yeah,
come to my house and
yeah,
appear in magic.
yeah,
And I've had classmates say to me, "How did you get Wang Lao to show you that?" And I said, "I asked him."
yeah, yeah,
And
yeah,
that's it. And they kind of look
yeah,
at you dumbfounded, like,
yeah,
"What? Yeah, yeah,
yeah,
asked him.
yeah,
Asked him." And the same thing comes to Sancho. I mean, I've had classmates criticize that I practice Sancho, with this
yeah,
silly sort of notion. People say, "Oh, you shouldn't teach fighting,"
yeah,
And it's, well, first of all, if you've attended my Sancho class, you'd know that it really wasn't about fighting. It was, I think, if you're fighting, contending,
yeah,
then you're not really doing good Sancho. Of course,
okay,
I've been guilty of that many times myself, but
yeah,
you learn from that. You
right,
realize, like, oh, I lost my cool,
yeah,
and I didn't roll back at all,
right, right,
and I didn't yield and neutralize, and I lost my cool, and that's why I have
yeah,
bruises all over me.
yeah,
Okay, and you learn, right? And you
yeah,
change. You need that crucible. But no, none of those other people ever asked me where I got my Sancho program from,
yeah,
because if they did, I would have said, speaking with Wang Laoshi. I mean, it's
yeah,
all based on what he told me to do. It's
yeah,
all based on his instruction.
yeah,
But if if you showed no interest in Sancho and did none of the sort of prerequisite training that you need to do with, the spear and so on to condition yourself,
right,
then you can't teach people that.
yeah,
You can't walk into an Olympic studio for Olympic gymnasts and say, "I want to be a gymnast."
yeah,
Say, "Well, okay, that's great. When you can run 10 miles and you can do these splits and you can do 300 push-ups and 500 sit-ups,
yeah,
come back and we'll start training you to be a world-class gymnast."
yeah,
You just don't walk in at the top. And I think a lot. That's why I said earlier. I think a lot of people just miss this about Wang Laoshi, and now unfortunately he's passed, and
yeah,
that's it.
yeah, absolutely. Well, going in, continuing from that, you mentioned that you learned a lot of sword stuff from him, and over the years you've become well known for your sword or your Jianfa sword methods, and really essentially almost single handedly renovating the Chinese swordsmanship. Uh, what made you kind of get into that and really kind of step up to that role?
Well, I've always been interested in the sword.
Yeah.
Somebody once said, and they were right, "I bet you used to fight with other kids in the backyard with a stick." Like, yeah, that I definitely did that.
Yeah, yeah,
I just
same
always
actually.
had a love and an interest of swordsmanship.
Right.
If I hadn't learned Taijiquan and I had ended up in some other camp or in European martial arts or whatever, I would probably be as deeply in some other sword art.
Right.
If life had given me different options if I hadn't ended up in Taijiquan. So, it's always had an interest and a passion for the sword. And I don't know, I was talking with some people years ago about making a series about swordsmanship around the world, and they were saying, well, why should we be even interested in doing this? And I said, I don't know what it is about the sword, but if you walk into like a video store, that was back when there were still video stores, and you look at how many pictures those boxes have a picture of some handsome guy or woman who is holding a sword.
Yeah.
And even when we imagine ourselves in a galaxy far, far away, where people are using lightsabers and have the ability to blow up entire planets, they're still using swords.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's something about swords.
Yeah.
I can't put my finger on what it is, but it has some attraction and allure to people.
Yeah.
And I would just, I think because I had that passion and I was willing to do the work, I got these, what I would consider really these essential building blocks. And at first, mostly being really how to do the basic cuts.
Right.
You see most people doing sword forms today, it's really obvious that they have no idea what they're doing. They have no idea about distance and timing. They don't even understand what part of the sword they should be deflecting with versus cutting.
Right.
You can't see, well, there was the deflection and there was the cut.
Yeah.
Where are they cutting is not even clear.
Right.
Because they don't even know what are the basic cuts of their system. Commonly, if you ask somebody, well, what are the cuts of your system? They don't know.
Yeah.
They don't know that. That'd be like saying, you're practicing Taijiquan, you don't know what ward off, roll back, press, push are.
Yeah.
Pull down, split elbow. I mean, they have to know those. Those are 8 basic movements.
Yeah.
How can you be practicing Taijiquan and not even know what they are, let alone be good at them?
Yeah.
So that was really important kind of breakthrough.
Yeah.
Because before that, I started to learn the form. I should back up and say first I learned the Yang Taijiquan from Liang. That was that would have been the publicly taught style of the Yang Taijiquan.
Yeah.
And Liang was also one of those guys who loved the sword, and so I dug in there with him and said, what are these basic cuts? Because I got the list of cuts, and I said, what are these cuts? And I sort of pestered him into showing me.
Yeah.
And that really changed the way I did the sword form. Most people were just sort of waving a stick around. It's like Harry Potter's wand or something. Including other Liang students, frankly.
Right.
But you had to really get in there and say, okay, what's the application? What are these specifically? What are these cuts? How are they delivered? Where are they aimed?
Yeah.
And once you have those keys, they're like a codex, and you can unlock everything.
Yeah.
And so I learned that form, and it was very good form. I really liked it. Still practice it. And then I was in Taiwan learning this Yang Family Michuan Taijiquan form, and it didn't make any sense to me. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. And I went up to one of my classmates who had been asked by Wang Lao-shi to give a demonstration of it, and had gotten some private lessons on the form from Master Wang. So I figured she should know.
Yeah.
And I asked her, what's that? What's this? What's this application? What's going on here? And she said, I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Could be this, could be that. And I thought, you're kidding me. You don't know. She lived there in Taiwan and been studying for years. I knew the form well, but didn't have any idea of any of the function. So frankly, I stopped practicing it when I came home because I didn't want to practice it mindlessly.
Right.
So that's why I thought I really want to learn this, and I asked Wang Lao-shi to come to the U.S. to teach it, and that's when he started really. That's when he said, this is the first time I've really taught this.
Yeah.
And so those are the keys, and then it started to all open up, and I realized, this the Michuan system and the Yang Taijiquan really work very differently. With it, one cuts on the pass with stepping forward, and one works what in Western terminology we call like a parry riposte sort of way. You deflect and countercut right away, and control the line that way. And so that was the key.
Yeah.
Once I started getting those things, then the form was different. And I was really practicing the form like there was somebody there with proper intent, instead of just going, what the heck is this? But I would also add there, I had 2 other elements that really made a gigantic difference for me.
Okay.
One was the cutting practice.
Yeah.
I talked with Wang Laoshi about this. And, fortunately, see when you probably had the same experience when you're with a teacher, especially a well-known teacher like Wang Laoshi, he has a lot of students.
Yeah.
It's sort of like being a kid in a big family. It's really hard to get your father's attention in 5 minutes. So when I was in Taiwan and that, I rarely could get any chance to ask even just a few questions because there were a lot of people there all the time.
Yeah.
Or see him at big seminars. But when I had Wang Laoshi at my school, I could have, it's often staying in my home.
Yeah.
I could sit with him, and at dinner and so on, and ask him and probe things and really get into things more deeply. And he explained, oh yes, they practice test cutting. Chinese practice test cutting.
Wow.
He said, it wasn't so formalized like we normally think of it today, or the way they practiced it in Japan.
Yeah.
But he said they made caoren, was literally a grass man.
Yeah.
Out of whatever materials would have been available. In the north, you wouldn't have had as much big bamboo. You'd use thinner bamboo or wild grass or hay. You tie it together.
Right.
And you cut that stuff up. You don't go online and order tatami mats. And so I started doing that because I realized a lot of the things that people were saying about the Chinese jian, even supposedly masters, was just nonsense. People would say straight swords don't cut well. And I thought, this is ridiculous.
Yeah.
Look at the public yang style. It has 13 basic cuts.
Yeah.
Only the ci and the dian use the tip.
Yeah.
Right? That means 87.5% of the time you're using the edge. How can it not be good for cutting? That's just silly. Just stop and think about these things.
Yeah.
And I have to admit, I parroted those things too when I first heard them. Because that's what I heard. That's what I repeated them.
Yeah.
And I realized, wait a minute, this got to be wrong.
Yeah.
I got to question this. So I started cutting, and I realized, well, I can do this.
Yeah.
And I was very fortunate at the time. Paul Champagne, a really good swordsmith, unfortunately also died fairly young, but really fantastic guy. And he was a really top-notch swordsmith.
Yeah.
And he would say, I want to learn enough sword work that I can make better swords. He wasn't interested in being a swordsman, and so he came and studied with me a little bit.
Yeah.
But he was really good at cutting because he's been, as a swordsmith, he had tested his swords and cut, and cut. So he was sort of my cutting guru. So I'd sometimes be doing something and I'd bend my sword and I'd call him up and he'd say, "You can't do that." I was like, "Yeah, I know now. I bent my sword. How do I straighten it?"
Yeah.
And so I made lots of mistakes. I banged up plenty of swords doing things, trying to cut things that were beyond. You start getting a little cocky. Oh, well, I cut that. Oh, I cut that.
Yeah.
Gee, can I cut this? And no, you can't cut that. So it was a lot of trial and error. So that taught me, and then Paul guided me a lot, and I realized okay, it's one thing to cut through stuff. Anybody can cut through something.
Yeah.
I mean, my son was cutting plastic bottles when he was 6 and 7.
Wow.
It's not a big deal to cut plastic bottles. It's useful in your practice, but it's not a big deal. But then how do you control it? There's a difference. One thing Paul made very clear, I really thank him for this, was there's a difference between cutting that tests the sword and cutting that tests the sword and the swordsman.
Right.
That was really important because just swinging it like a baseball bat and getting through your target is not useful to a swordsman.
Yeah.
You have to start from here I deflected to here, or here's my ready position, and I have to control the aftercut. You just can't swing it wild.
Right.
So that was very important. So I actually use these things. And it's kind of thing that people have forgotten. I say, people don't practice the systems anymore.
Yeah.
And, I always say, look, if you have a model of a gun, model of a pistol, that doesn't weigh what a real pistol weighs half or less.
Yeah.
And it's not balanced in the way a pistol is balanced. And you practice with very careful breathing, inhale, exhale, pointing and squeezing the trigger. That might be good for your form, right?
Yeah.
That may help your biomechanics in shooting in a combat situation or a competition situation. But no one's going to say you're an expert marksman if that's all you've ever done.
Yeah.
But we get guys who've never cut a thing with a sword, who've never faced anybody with a sword, who are, if they're wearing the white robes and they trained on Wudang Mountain, they're great masters of the sword.
Yeah.
The truth is they haven't begun sword practice yet.
Yeah.
That's the thing that people don't want to hear. I know I'm pissing a lot of people off right now. I don't care. You got to start being realistic about these things.
Yeah.
If you've never fired a gun, I don't care how many times you practiced aiming it, you're not a marksman. You have to shoot and hit the target and hit it where you're supposed to hit it,
right,
in the bullseye.
Right.
If you swinging a sword around and then you come to cut a plastic bottle and your sword bounces off of it, which I've seen many times.
Yeah.
I don't care what color robes you got or what hairdo you have or what color your skin is. You don't know anything about sword work yet.
Right.
You're still a beginner. I don't care if you've done the form beautifully for years. I don't care if you got gold medals from some tournament.
Yeah.
You can't use the weapon to do what it's supposed to do. You don't understand it.
Yeah.
So I'm very emphatic about that. I know that rubs people the wrong way.
Yeah.
But come on, it's time that we start paying attention and being realistic. So anyway, that's the third pillar I would say is for my sword practice is the antiques. I was in the antique business really early.
Oh wow, I didn't know that.
And I was able to handle more than 3,000 pieces. I owned more than 600, and that's a big difference. I mean, I meet people all the time who tell me what a Chinese sword looks like, and I say that's really interesting. I've never seen one like that ever.
Yeah.
And they're really surprised because they're like, but that's our lineage sword. I'm like, well, have you ever handled an antique sword? And the answer is always no. How about your teacher? Does your teacher own or have handled it? No.
Yeah.
Okay, look, I've handled well over 1,000 yen, and I've never seen one like you're describing.
Right.
So sorry. That if that existed, it was a weird anomaly.
Yeah.
And that's the thing. So when you handle the real, so that combination, good proper teaching from Wang Laoshi, the test cutting to really apply the teaching, right? It's one thing to have the teaching, you got to apply that teaching.
Yeah.
Of course, also in there, all of the sword work, crossing blades with people for years, people who want to do you harm in a friendly way. I mean, I didn't have any malicious fights with people who were really trying to hurt me, but I had my share of bouts with people who were from other systems who wanted to show that their system was better, just like I want to show my system works, right? We all want to do that.
Yeah.
And, if some of those blows had hit, I'd had a broken bone.
Right.
I wouldn't have blamed them for it. I willingly took the bout,
absolutely.
So you have to have those, and then handling the real material, because then this is what a real sword is like.
Yeah.
And that's why I designed, of course, my cutting gen. I mean, it's based on that, Same with the Dao.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and a lot of times what I see with people is that, they kind of play around with a lot of these flimsy swords and stuff like that, and they're just going through the motions and things like that, and then it's almost like just a kid just kind of playing with a toy sword. It's no better than that, really, and
that's really unfortunate because they're spending their time.
Yeah.
We all invest a lot in our training.
Yeah.
You spend money to pay your tuition, to travel, but you can always make more money, but your life is eventually going to come to an end.
Yeah.
Right? All of us will leave one day. Yeah. And I don't want to waste my time.
Yeah, absolutely.
I've only got 100 or so years here, and I want to make sure I use all of it wisely.
Yeah.
I don't want to use it, and of course we make mistakes, but to practice. That's why I've seen videos, and again, I'm not trying to pick a fight with anybody, but I think we've got to start being really honest with ourselves if we're going to see this art flourish. You were very kind to say, I've worked to renovate this art, and it's I love it. It's a passion I have, so I'm really happy to be doing this. I really enjoy traveling and teaching and sharing everything I can. But we're still at a place where, even though a lot of attitudes have changed, we have good weapons for practice and so on now, that there's still a lot of people, though, who go for the flash instead of the spirit, You like the style and the coolness and the groovy athletic forms. And, that's just not really the art.
Right.
And so it's a shame when I see somebody who's, this is Master so-and-so.
Yeah.
And he's presenting a form, you're just seeing something on YouTube or that.
Yeah.
And, look, it's not even a sword.
Yeah.
You can't tell me this guy is a master of the sword if he's never practiced with a sword.
Yeah.
This is just being sensible and logical and using common sense.
Yeah.
People shouldn't be offended when we point that out.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, and I've talked about this with other people. I think a lot of people become so highly invested with what they're doing that it almost blindsides them, like, or blinds them to the reality of what it is versus, what they want it to be. And they become so attached to it. And when they feel threatened, they feel like they need to defend it.
Right, right. Well, that's true. I think Alan Watts said this really well once. He said, nobody wants to be halfway up the ladder and realize they've got it leaning on the wrong wall.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
That's
I
a
think
good way to put
it's really hard. It's exactly the problem. What
Yeah.
you're saying is 100% true. We've all seen that over and over again. I think the problem is that nobody wants to admit they've wasted their life.
Yeah.
And so if you spent 10 years with somebody and you realize, like, oh my goodness, this is not, especially with sword, this is not it at all.
Yeah.
It's very hard for any of us to say, wow, I just wasted 10 years.
Yeah.
And so rather than climb down the ladder and move it over to another wall,
Yeah.
they'll climb up a little bit further and get discouraged.
Yeah.
And it's hard. I mean, it is hard, but the choice is move the ladder or keep wasting your time.
Yeah.
And it's a hard decision. It's a bitter decision, but you're right. As in Chinese martial arts often say, ask you, can you eat bitter?
Yeah. Yeah.
And sure, cool. Yeah. So if you're not willing to eat bitter, you're not going to go very far.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it goes back to what you told me about the story with your teacher, how he started studying Yang Family Taijiquan, is that he had to give up all those other styles, and it's always that Zen story of emptying your cup to learn more and to start off as a beginner again, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, in terms of Tai Chi sword, or in terms of the Chinese swordsmanship, what is your approach to sparring, to preparing people to kind of understand a more combative sense with the sword with Jian?
The first thing I would say is that, unlike some other people in our time, I'm not looking to make this safe.
Right.
I mean, I'm really clear about that. I'm purposely keeping it dangerous.
Yeah, which is a good thing.
Yeah, well, for one thing, of course, it's realistic. Some people can argue, what's the point of that? It's a fair question. I mean, it's fairly. I mean, we live in the age of firearms, What's the point of learning a sword? I'm not going to charge onto the battlefield with my Jian. So, but I would say, if there's not real danger, there's not real fear.
Yeah.
And if there's not real fear, there isn't that opportunity to let go of that and learn how to get past that.
Right.
So, as a martial practice, or as a martial way, if you will, it has to have this kind of element.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, it's different. My son was for many years a very serious competitive fencer. I spent a lot of time at fencing competitions here and internationally.
Yeah.
And it's nerve-wracking, when you're getting those final rounds and, are you going to make the top 8? It's a lot of pressure.
Yeah.
But that pressure is not the same as somebody standing in front of you with a chunk of wood that could break one of your bones.
Right.
So, the nervousness of competition is something that's a real thing to deal with. It's not like the kind of fear you can have when somebody is going to swing a chunk of hardwood at you.
Right.
So I think that's a very important element. If you're not doing that, then you're turning it into a sport.
Yeah.
And to be clear, although I'm really emphatic about keeping the martial arts and not turning them into this martial artsy kind of stuff.
Yeah.
I have nothing against that. Other stuff. I just want you to be clear. I know people who do lightsaber stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool. They're having fun.
Yeah.
Enjoy your life. If that's what gives you pleasure, then dress up and get your toys and bang away.
Yeah.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But don't come into my house with a plastic toy. That's an insult.
Yeah.
If I go to your house and you want me to show you something, and it's lightsabers. Okay, sure, I'll try with you. Why not?
Yeah.
But in my house, this is a place for Jianfa. This is not a place for Jedi. You
Right.
know,
Right.
there's one's real and one is fun, and they're
Yeah.
different, and it's all cool. If you like sport fencing, sports fencing is great. I used to not think so much of it. I spent a lot of time around it, and I'm really very impressed by it. It's an amazing sport, but it's a sport. It's different, you know. So we should be clear about that to start with. I mean, if you don't have that clarity to begin with, we can't even talk about how practice.
Right.
There, then, though, I would say first thing is some months of practicing your basic cuts.
Yeah.
You have to have good control.
Right.
Because this is dangerous.
Right.
And you're going to get hit, and you are going to be hurt, and you're going to get bruises regularly.
Right.
But you shouldn't be hitting. You should be able to control so that it really hurts, but you don't break the guy's bone.
Right.
To break
makes
somebody's
sense.
forearm.
Yeah.
It'd be very easy to do that.
Yeah.
So you have to have good control.
Yeah.
So you have to practice your basic cuts and combinations and so on. And really drill your footwork. People do not practice footwork enough.
Yeah.
So practice all your footwork.
Yeah.
From there, then you're practicing drills, and of course you have to have appropriate protective gear. Very important to protect your eyes.
Right.
Some drills, if you're stationary, you're beginning, you're doing slow, you don't need to be fully geared up.
Yeah.
I like to see, in fact, in the beginning when students are going slow, that they don't use a lot of gear.
Yeah.
Because if you get hit and it hurts, you learn fast.
Yeah.
Don't let your elbow stick out.
Yeah.
When you get whacked on your elbow, man, it hurts for a week.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
You often, every time you bump into something, you curse him like a Jersey boy because it really hurts,
Right.
And it teaches you, keep your elbow down.
Right.
You get whacked with a piece of foam, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I like to see, we say fencing naked, but of course we actually have our clothes on, but
Well, yeah.
no, lots of gear.
Yeah.
Then once you've learned, then you bring up power, you can use more gear.
Yeah.
So when you go full tilt with somebody else who's good, and you could walk into something,
Yeah.
so even if your partner is good enough to control things, there will be accidents, you will get hurt.
Right.
So then you can have proper helmet, gloves, and body gear stuff.
Right.
From there you go, of course, there's drills.
Yeah.
So there's partner drills.
Yeah.
There are fixed step.
Right.
And then moving step. It's really important that you get your hand work
Yeah.
really down and develop this adaptive hand
Yeah.
before you move your feet.
Yeah.
If you start moving your feet a lot, there's a tendency to run away and charge in and run away and charge in. So you're not really controlling things well.
Yeah.
You're not learning to deflect well.
Yeah.
So you fix step and then add the stepping.
Right.
So you get all those pattern drills. And then as that's developing, you will have sort of semi-free sword play.
Right.
First fixed step. You can do your sword play fixed step, so it's free.
Right.
And then, moving a little bit, one step, half step, and then totally free. And that's actually mentioned in the Wudang manual. It's funny. It's one of the things that I developed myself from my experience. And then after doing that, when I translated the Wudang manual, it was there. I was like, oh, cool.
Yeah.
I had it right because I was just doing so. It's not a surprise, right? It's just logical.
Yeah.
So you see references to that kind of thing in the Wudang manual. And then, of course, you get to free play. When you're doing free play, you can start it slow. I always like to see students, I say, do it at a learning speed, a speed that it's fast enough that you can't think about it, but it's slow enough that you're actually still learning and doing the techniques properly. So it might be half speed, 3/4 speed, 80% speed, and then you slowly ramp up so that you're not just, two guys swinging wildly at each other.
Right.
But also there, I often start with students, okay, you get one cut.
Yeah.
You do one, I do one, you do one. And it's random, but it's controlled, so it allows us to start moving properly and deflecting and countercutting and seeing the angle and where the openings are going to be created and so on. And then you can go to free. So if you get that kind of intermediary step where you're kind of just going one for one, that's good. And then also students, to get their confidence. And then say, okay, I can do this. Look at that. I actually deflected and countercut. And then it gets free.
Okay. Nice. Nice. Very nice. It, we see this a lot nowadays, and I kind of know your opinion on this already, but I think it's good to have you say it a little bit more broadly so other people kind of hear it. You see this a lot of this kind of push hands with a sword, essentially like a sticky sword type of
Yes.
stuff, and where did that come about? Because obviously, there's I've read some of the sword manuals and stuff like that. There's no real mention of any of that type of stuff, but you see it a lot in some of the more kind of quote unquote
Yeah.
modern Tai Chi schools.
Yes. Well, first of all, people should understand that that is a modern practice. I've
Yeah.
never seen any mention of it anywhere in any classical Qing era practice.
Hmm.
So it's absolutely a modern practice.
Right.
Thinking that is fencing or swordplay or anything like that is really tantamount to saying push hands is street fighting.
Right.
It just makes no sense. It's just not. It's just not being honest. This is what I said, alluding to earlier. We just really need to be honest with ourselves.
Yeah.
And please, people out there who I'm rubbing the wrong way, if someone holds up a mirror and you don't like what you're seeing in that mirror, don't get mad at the person holding the mirror, please,
Or the mirror.
or the mirror, or punch, or break the mirror.
Yeah.
You know, if we want to succeed and we want to just for ourselves, continue
Right.
to progress and continue to get things back that are interesting for your life,
Yeah.
then you have to be seriously introspective at times, and you have to
Right.
take a look at things
Right.
and go, yeah, I'm not doing that right, or I could be better.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm sorry, I'm taking a diagonal here, but I was
No, it's okay.
chatting with a guy today, and his did some cutting, and I gave him some. It was not bad, but there were some things that he could improve, and I made some suggestions for him, and he was like, yeah, you know, as soon as I felt good, but as soon as I finished, afterwards I wasn't happy with it. And
Yeah.
I'm the exact same way. This
Yeah.
week I was practicing some cutting earlier this week, and it was good. You know, it was all right, and it was a particularly difficult cut. The Japanese call it tombogiri. It means a dragonfly cut, where you have something balanced,
Mhm.
and you cut one side, and of course it starts to fall, and you have to quickly come around and cut the other side.
Right.
And I've been able to do it in the past, but not real consistently.
Yeah.
And so today, excuse me, pardon me, this week I was able to do it consistently one after the other. So that felt good. It was a good
Yeah.
improvement.
Yeah.
But afterwards I thought, you know, I could have done that better.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think of all the ways I could improve it. You
Yeah.
know, a lot of people will look at that and go, "Wow, that is a difficult cut. It's considered one of the most difficult pairs of cuts to do because you have to be fast and really accurate."
Yeah.
I
Absolutely.
did it with a piece of bamboo. So
Yeah.
if you don't hit it at the right angle, if your blade is turning or as a chiseling angle thing, you'll hit it and it'll go flying away because it's
Right.
just balanced there on top of the cutting stand.
Right.
You know.
Yeah.
And I think this is the way we have to be. If you want to reach a high level and you want to get something special for yourself,
Yeah.
not for anybody else, you have to be willing to eat bitter. You have to look
Yeah.
in the mirror and go, yeah, that was good, but no, I can do it better.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Absolutely.
So I do that. So, but back to the sticky sword stuff. I think this is where people are really deluding themselves. They're thinking
Yeah.
of this like it's fencing,
Yeah.
and that's just plain silly. It's not fencing.
Yeah.
The way it's practiced today leads to a lot of misconceptions about distance and timing,
Yeah.
and especially tip control. I never see
Yeah.
anybody doing it with any sense of tip control.
Yeah.
If they weren't playing a game that demanded that you stick to the sword all the time, they're constantly open.
Yeah.
Constantly open
Yeah.
to this going, taking your sword away and hitting him with a lethal cut to the head, neck, inside the leg, anywhere.
Yeah.
So I don't see the people I've met, people who train with me, who've said that they've gotten stuff from it.
Yeah.
I can accept that maybe for some people that's the case,
Yeah.
but for the majority of people practicing it today, it is leading them down, you know,
Yeah.
the wrong way.
Yeah.
And I would say to those people who, if you think that, honestly say and think that what you're doing is, quote, fencing,
Yeah.
then I would say go to any fencing gym, any HEMA club, any one of my seminars,
Yeah.
and ask politely
Yeah.
for a bout with somebody
Yeah.
who's not, because no one's going to follow your rules
Yeah.
in a street fight.
Right.
You know,
Yeah. Of course.
right? Nobody comes. I always say, no one comes up and see you at the ATM at 3 a.m. and says, give me your money or I'm going to fajing you into the wall.
Yeah.
I'm gonna give you such a push.
Yeah.
You're gonna wake up next week.
Yeah.
That's not how it's coming at you.
Yeah.
And so it just leads to just a gigantic pile of misconceptions.
Yeah.
As far as sword work is concerned.
Yeah.
So I think it's really an experiment, a modern experiment.
Yeah.
That didn't work.
Yeah.
And we have to just be honest about that. And no matter
Yeah.
how much you've invested in it, just have to be honest about that.
Yeah. And to me, it kind of looks potentially pretty dangerous. And I think it falls kind of in that line of people trying to take what works in kind of a bare hand, weaponless practice and apply it to weapons. And that always seems a bit of a red flag, as
Sure. Absolutely. And there are some ways that it's dangerous sometimes when people are practicing because they're sometimes not wearing any eye protection.
Right.
And that's just, if you come to my school and you get a bruise, if you get a lot of bruises, we say, oh, cool, you joined the Leopard Club, you're all right.
Yeah.
I don't care if you get bruises, if your nose gets broken. My nose has been broken more times than I could ever count. Know, it's just part of being a martial artist. If bone gets broken, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
You can still come to practice with your arm in a sling.
Yeah.
But your eyes you can't replace.
Yeah.
So we really must be careful with the eyes.
Yeah.
Absolutely have to have good, proper eye protection. A lot of people aren't doing that. So that in itself is dangerous. But I think you're right. It's very dangerous in the sort of, frankly, self-delusion. And I think this is where it goes back to what I have said again and again.
Yeah.
People today are martial artsy.
Yeah.
They're not martial artists.
Yeah.
These guys want to call themselves swordsmen. They want to say we fence.
Yeah.
But in fact, they wouldn't dare cross swords with anybody who intended to actually strike them.
Yeah.
Not okay, put your sword out and I'll very gently touch it and we'll play this game.
Yeah.
And that is not swordplay.
Yeah.
Any more than thinking like single and push hands is really important. Single hand push hands is really great. I love to do single hand push hands. That's really trained my students in that a lot. It's very, very useful in learning basic principles.
Yeah.
But if you think that you're the bestest, you could be the absolute best on the planet of single hand push hands, you better not get in a street fight in a bad neighborhood.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because you can't hit.
Yeah.
You can't move. And it leads, one of the big misconceptions that we have today, because people are not practicing the system, they're practicing bits of the system, is the ideas of sticking and following.
Yeah.
When I first started doing sword work, we're talking 20 some years ago, when I was really getting to be started to be publicly known, I'd have two camps saying I was wrong. One camp would say I was doing it wrong because I wasn't sticking to the blade all the time.
Yeah.
The other camp was saying I was doing it wrong because when I deflected, I touched the other guy's blade. so I was completely wrong by everybody's standard.
Yeah.
And I would say, look, and I would jokingly do this, like I would do this at a seminar. I would say, you're saying that you absolutely have to be physically touching, not sticking and following. People be adamantly yes. And I'd say, okay, this guy's fist, I take some guy from the class and say, make a fist. And I put his fist against my nose. And I'd say, so I'm not allowed to yield and neutralize until his fist is touching my nose. And now I do the nose roll back. I said, you can see from the shape of my nose that I failed at that technique many times.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I'd say, and then sometimes the people would still give me the skeptical. I'd go to my bag and I'd draw a blade or live blade. And I'd say, okay, with this blade, this is a real sword. I can put it through you and tract it faster than your eyes can see it.
Yeah. And
report to your brain that it's happened.
Yeah.
Now, are you going to tell me that absolutely, without question, you must sticking and following means that you first have to let the blade touch you, that you're physically touching, and then you'll yield and neutralize.
Yeah.
This blade's coming at you. It will go through you.
Yeah.
And of course, nobody wants to try that. And of course, it's nonsense. Sticking and following when you're touching is a great exercise to learn sticking and following.
Yeah.
You can't stick and follow without touching. You're a beginner. I don't care if you've done it for 30 years.
Yeah.
You're practicing. You're a 30-year-old beginner.
Right.
Period. It's
Yeah.
another thing I know people are not going to like me saying, but it's true. If
Yeah.
you have to practice so that you feel like you're physically touching while
Yeah.
there's space. When that fist comes at you, when the blade is coming at you, you have to be able to yield and neutralize. Sometimes you'll deflect it with your hands or your blade. Sometimes you'll move it in such a way that it can't touch you. But
Yeah.
you're always moving, sticking, and falling across space.
Right.
You can't do that, and you're not training to do that. It doesn't matter how many decades you got in the art. You're still doing beginner's practice.
Right.
And you may have the potential. Somebody's done it for years may be able to very quickly advance.
Yeah, of
Because
course.
they've got a big foundation.
Yeah.
But until they do, they're still doing beginners. It's like repeating freshman English 101 for 20 years. They're really good at freshman English now.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
you're not. That doesn't mean you're got a degree in literature.
Right.
So
Right.
it's
Absolutely.
the kind of thing that we have to be clear about. That I don't think people don't like someone like me saying this because it's holding up that mirror.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Well-
but sorry.
Yeah. Well,
Actually, sorry, not sorry. Come on.
Yeah.
Let's just be
Yeah.
realistic.
yeah.
So.
Well, I mean, we need to hold up that mirror more often because obviously we're starting to see what's happening to people who haven't had that mirror put in front of them, and it's showing the effects of decades, maybe even close to a century of watered down Taijiquan
Yes.
and and Chinese martial arts in general, and all these guys. And I don't want to go too far into that, but these guys who are getting knocked out, whether they're frauds or not, it's still
Wait, it's
kind of
not even that they got knocked out.
yeah,
It's that they weren't able to do anything in response to being
Right.
punched.
right,
I mean, if you get beaten, you get beaten.
yeah,
If Mike Tyson shows up here and wants a challenge bout with Scott Rodell, I'd say, oh, sorry, he moved. He lives in Alaska. You should go there.
Yeah.
The guy's a monster. I don't
Yeah.
want to try to roll back his punches.
Yeah. Yeah.
I like my internal organs to remain as one piece.
Right.
Somebody can lose,
yeah,
but if there's losing with some respect,
Yeah.
for yourself and winning the other guy's respect,
yeah,
right?
yeah,
And there's not even be able to move your feet or roll back or deliver a powerful counter strike yourself,
yeah, absolutely,
and that's the situation. So,
Yeah.
of course, we all know what's happened recently, and frankly, this can be good for our art. This is
Yeah.
part of us looking at the mirror and saying,
Yeah.
this. I mean, I have rubbed people in my lineage the wrong way by calling people out when I
Yeah.
thought that they were, fronting, frankly.
right, right. Well,
And I will continue to do that. I am not going to stand up. I'm not going to ignore that in my own lineage, especially.
yeah,
And I'm not going to pretend that because some guy is Grandmaster so-and-so and has the right robes on, that his sword work is good.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, there's too much, hero worship, too much master worship in Chinese martial arts, and
Absolutely.
there's a difference between respecting people and worshiping them. And
Absolutely.
I think the line has been blurred too much on that, and we need to really start defining it again because people will get hurt. I mean, these masters who are completely incompetent in defending themselves in a fight, they have students.
They can
and
have seminars and have 50 people there.
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
100 people. But absolutely, and it's as you know, there is a sort of racism in Chinese martial arts. If you're a Chinese
Yeah.
guy, you're automatically a master or a grandmaster.
Yeah.
If you're not Chinese, well, then you might not even be able to know anything. You can't
Yeah.
possibly know it because you're not Chinese.
Yeah.
We've all seen that. But and that's certainly made my career probably a little more difficult at times.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I think it's also helped me
Yeah.
because nobody is coming to me
Yeah.
because I got the right lineage, a pedigree, and I
Right.
got fancy embroidered robes.
Right.
They're coming to me because, oh, look, that guy can do it.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, and so I end up with a better student. I may not have
Right.
as many students,
Yeah.
but I believe, and I feel very fortunate about this. I have to say, I think I don't mean to sound boastful at all, but forgive me if I do. I think I've been really successful in my work. And I've enjoyed
Yeah.
it. It's been great. I mean,
Yeah.
it's really fantastic to travel to places like Estonia and Australia and meet
Yeah.
people and spread the art and meet people who have such enthusiasm,
Yeah.
and they treat me well too. People have been very good to me over the years,
Yeah.
and so I appreciate that from them. So I can say I've been pretty successful, I believe, and I don't mean to sound like I'm bragging, and I'm not resting on my laurels. I got so much more work that I'm doing and I plan
Yeah.
on doing. I'm not no plans to slow down.
Yeah. Absolutely.
I mean, I've been since this pandemic. I have not had a day off.
Yeah.
Every single day, I'm
Yeah.
teaching. I'm busier now than before because I'm not flying.
Yeah.
I'm here. I got the webinars. I got private classes. I'm
Yeah.
meeting with groups privately online,
Yeah.
and it's great. I'm loving it. It's really good.
Absolutely.
People are coming, but because of that, the people that are coming to me are coming because they go, all right, this guy's supposed to be able to really do it. Let me really do it. Let me really check him out. And they come in and they cross blades and they go, oh yeah, this is good.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
And whereas people from other places with fancy robes, they're getting a different kind of student.
Yeah.
So they may be getting a lot of students, maybe
Yeah.
more than me, but what are they really going to build in the long run?
Yeah.
So I'd rather be finding these people who are not coming to me because of the color of my skin. If I'll paraphrase a great American, I want to be judged by the content of my character and the skill in my hands.
Yeah.
You know, and I feel I've gotten that. So
yeah, absolutely.
I may be ignored by certain people because I haven't got the robes.
Yeah.
So what?
Yeah, absolutely.
Those are people who probably aren't going to continue very far anyway. So
yeah, definitely. Well, I want to be respectful of your time. We're closing in on an hour and 20 minutes.
Yes.
And a little longer than.
I'm sometimes long-winded.
Yeah, no, that's okay. If it's good quality material, sometimes it's good to get into a long discussion. But I just wanted to ask, where can people find you? Where can people get a hold of you? You actually have an online academy being set up.
Yes.
So what's going on with that?
So, of course, you can always find us at our website.
Yeah.
GRT is TomC.org. We use the old-fashioned T instead of D for Taoist.
Yeah.
So T is Tom, GRTC.org. And of course, there's a Great River page on Facebook, so you can find Great River Taoist Center there.
Yeah.
And the academy should be through grtc.org. We started that in response to the way the webinars have been going.
Yeah.
The webinars started, the sword webinars, because I had planned, been in England for about 3.5 weeks this April, teaching public seminars, private students, and also meeting. We had rented a castle. I had a castle rented for my apprentice students. As I started a training program because, eventually I'm not going to do this. I always say there's going to be one day I'm going to wake up and the alarm's going to go off at 5:30 in the morning and I'm going to go, screw it, I'm not going to the airport. And I can practice on their own. I'll phone it in, It's traveling, getting places is great. The traveling part is terrible. I really, and I travel a lot. I know more about travel than anybody should know.
Yeah.
But, so we were just talking and thought, well, look, nobody wants to stop,
Yeah.
What about this webinar thing? Why don't we give that a try,
Right.
And I wouldn't have thought about it because normally I would be on the road. I'm flying 85,000 miles a year. I wouldn't have time to do anything else.
Yeah.
And so we tried it. We got a fantastic response. We're usually getting over 60 people most sessions.
Yeah.
And then from all over the place. It's great.
Yeah.
So reaching places that wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah.
And then we realized, okay, we got to formalize this a little bit more to make it easier for people, easier for us also.
Yeah.
So we're setting it up so it'll be a simple subscription base.
Yeah.
instead of buying a course and having to buy a course again.
Right.
And then people will be able to
Yeah.
choose the menu if they only want Daofa, they only want the Miao Dao and Dan Dao, they only want the Jianfa, they can do that.
Right.
Or pay a flat fee, which is much cheaper than buying all those things separately.
Right.
And get access to everything.
Yeah.
And we're putting in the usual sort of resources, little video clips,
Yeah.
PDFs, things like that people who are joined up to that can have access to.
Yeah.
So, but of course, I should say, and I understand some people will be skeptical of online training, and I don't blame them, and they should be skeptical of that.
Yeah.
There's different qualities of that. This online training is a supplement for the in-person trainings.
Right.
As soon as we can start traveling again, I expect next summer I will be traveling again. Absolutely.
Yeah.
As soon as there's a vaccine, so I can, I don't endanger my family.
Right.
I will be on the road again, traveling.
Yeah.
Everywhere, wherever I'm wanted, I will be. If it's from Alaska to Netherlands, to UK, Poland, and those places I'll be back to.
Yeah.
And I miss seeing my students.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to say, let's get our footwork down. Let's get our basic cuts perfected. What are the combinations, so that when we come back to the two-person work, we've got a really good, solid foundation.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm hoping to build and working on everybody with, and looking forward to being back on the road and seeing everybody.
Great. Well, I'm definitely looking forward to when that's set up. I think the tentative time is around early kind of mid-June. I know Gavin King, if I'm not mistaken,
Yes.
he's been working hard at that and trying to get that set up.
So June 1st is when Gavin has been a really fantastic help. Couldn't have done it without him.
Yeah.
I mean, really, the teacher usually gets the accolades,
Right.
but without question, my success is built on the help of many people over the years. Absolutely. Yeah. Students and people even outside, and friends of students. I mean, all the video work we've done, it's all been volunteer.
Right.
There's a studio up in Toronto where they let me come and use the studio for free. You're paying, several $100s an hour normally. So they can shoot movies in this. It's a full-on studio. Another guy there, Teague Fong, has been very helpful.
Yeah.
His latest project is The Boys for Amazon. So top-notch guys come in, film stuff, teach me stuff.
Yeah.
How to make good videos. I've learned a lot from those guys and got a lot more to learn.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
everything is thanks to those guys. Really appreciate it. So we're aiming, fingers crossed, nothing goes wrong. June 1st, the online academy will launch.
Awesome.
So
awesome. Looking forward to it.
Me
Great.
too.
Yeah. Well, Scott Lauscher, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I think this is probably my longest podcast so far. So it's obviously
better
been.
break it into two. We won't bore people to death.
Oh no, I'm going to put the whole thing up once, so people will just have to deal with it.
Suffer through my long-windedness.
Yeah, that's okay. Well, I mean, when you have Joe Rogan, who's got like 3-4 hour long podcasts, I think people can suffer through an hour and 30 minutes of us chatting away. So, but I do appreciate you coming on today, and hopefully, once everything kind of gets back to normal, we can swing back around and chat a little bit more about stuff and discuss a few more things.
That would be my pleasure. I'd love to do it.
Great. Fantastic. Well, I hope you have a great day, and
You too.
Stay safe and healthy.
Stay strong. Everybody stay strong.
Awesome. I'll look forward to talking to you soon.
Okay. 再见.
再见. Well, thank you everybody for tuning in. Yes, obviously that was kind of our longest podcast. I usually try to aim these things about 45 minutes to an hour, but we had a lot of good discussion topics, and I've been following Scott Rodell for some time. When I first found his book, Chinese Swordsmanship, the Yang Family Taijiquan tradition, and always been interested in learning a lot of his stuff and things like that, and it's been very, very interesting. So I'll post everything in the show notes. So look out for all that stuff, and you can see where to get into his online academy when that starts up in a few days. And thank you for listening. And remember, if you want to support the podcast, you can find Ground Dragon Martial Arts on patreon.com. And I would appreciate that. It's just $1 a month. It really helps me kind of support the time and energy that goes into producing these podcasts, as well as writing, as well as videos and stuff like that, which I'm hoping to start putting out more. So thank you very much, and I hope all of you stay safe and healthy, and have a great day.